So if you viewed any of my other YouTube videos, you will know that my John Deere 445 seized its engine back in the winter and was left stranded out in the snow during a very long and snowy winter. And I've been really waiting for for spring to come, and it's like April the 19th now, and it just feels like spring today. It's been a long wait, and it was even snowing this week in the last 2 days again, but it's nice to be out here now. This is the engine that I pulled. That's on another video. This is what was the seized engine, or is the seized engine, or it doesn't seem to be completely seized now. And this is the engine that I was rebuilding inside during the winter. I bought it on eBay relatively inexpensively and did a complete rebuild on this one to drop in. So the task right now is to just transfer over a couple of the ancillaries. So the flywheel I just took off, pretty easy actually. I was kind of fearing I don't have a puller, but the nut came off pretty easily. I left the nut on, gave it a good solid tap, and then the flywheel freed up without any need to pull. So and I read that tip in the Kawasaki manual. I look at both the John Deere manual for the FD620D, and I also have the Kawasaki manual, and I sort of flip between the two of them. But that was mentioned in the Kawasaki manual, how to take the flywheel away without having a puller. So then I can now mount the stator, and I have a cleaned up stator here that came with the engine. I'm assuming that's good. I'm going to mount that on, mount the flywheel on again, this is the rebuild engine. I can then mount the starter and a couple of other bits, and then the engine mounts. One is already off of the other engine, it's over there, and the other one is still on the original engine. I actually gave this is the engine that was in the John Deere 445, so it's got 992 hours on it. I did give it a power wash this morning so to get any grease away, so I can see what I'm playing with here. But it was actually quite clean when I pulled it, relatively speaking anyway. Far cleaner than this engine that I rebuilt, and I had to clean to start the rebuild. So that's where I am. I'm pleased to be at this point. It shouldn't take me long now to mount the flywheel and hook up the wiring to the engine, do the again the engine mounts, the starter, the fan assembly, and then I'm thinking tomorrow should be able to drop it back in. So at long last, making some progress here. Well, I've been taking my time transferring parts over, cleaning them, attaching them to the engine, and the temptation is always to rush these jobs. I'm so keen to get it done, but on the other hand, the last thing I want is to make a mistake and have the engine fitted in and then find I've got to pull it out again for something stupid. So here she is. She's looking good, but the only concern I have right now, I mean, everything's clean, the electrics are in place, coils, ignition, fuel systems all on, everything's hooked up. My only concern is the fan and the fan belt. There's very little adjustment, and the alignment between the pulley coming off of the flywheel and the pulley up here for the fan does not look good. Now there are shims behind the pulley wheel here and the flywheel, and there were a couple of shims that came off the other engine that I transferred. I can't believe it's that much out. It just does not look right. So before I go any further, I'm going to look into this and see if there's something I've done wrong. Everything's gone on exactly as it should, but that alignment is like a quarter of an inch, maybe more, out, and it looks as though that belt could pop. So the last thing I want to do is have a problem with that. But anyway, engine is looking good. Well, I did look at the situation on this fan belt offset, and as much as it alarmed me when I first saw it, looking at the manuals and then taking a look at my John Deere 425, the offset is of course necessary. It's part of the tensioning process for these belts. There is no normal adjustment on the top pulley here. In other words, you can't vertically go up and down with this. The only adjustment is to be able to add or remove shims on this, what they call half sheave down here. And tension is good. So if I was to try and align it anymore, it wouldn't be properly tensioned. So this is the way it goes. Anyway, I now have the I've got it over by the tractor. I've got the chain on here ready to lift and carry and place in the tractor. I did a little bit of cleanup in here. Didn't need a lot. Didn't have to get out the power wash or anything like that. It was already pretty clean. Add a little spray paint where the battery goes, because there was naturally a bit of rust there, just surface rust. But all in all, it's nice that I've got a fairly clean engine bay and a nice clean new-like engine. All the pieces are being thoroughly cleaned, ready to go in. So that's what I'm about to do. Okay, the 3 bolts connecting essentially the drive shaft to the flywheel went in pretty easily, actually. A lot easier getting them in than taking them out. I was able to get access from underneath and line them up pretty easily. I thought that might be a problem. I have to say it was a good idea that I kept the bolts loose until everything else was hooked up, because I did need to wiggle it a little bit to get the shaft up and right in position there, and to have movement on the engine was important. So that's all hooked up. Everything's torqued down there in terms of the bolts, the mounting bolts. I've been taking my time, don't want to make a mistake, connecting up all the wiring, the harness, the main power supply, the coolant hoses, etc., etc. About to put the filter assembly on here, which also has obviously some connections to be made to it, and then I'll be adding the exhaust and the cowling and the main frame that goes on the front here. Although I might put the main frame, which put the 4 bolts down there, and then obviously I'm going to have to put coolant and oil in and everything like that. I've got the battery on charge because it's been sitting out all this time. Put the battery in, and then be in a good position, I think, to give it a try. So far so good. Everything there is hooked up completely. Batteries on, fluids are in, oil, coolant, etc. I did lose a little bit of time, and it's worth noting this. The solenoid for the starter motor was giving me a problem. Whenever I touched the battery, the ground to connect up the battery, I already had the live lead in place. The starter motor was whirring, and I was getting a spark at the battery. And I checked, I thought at first I had an electrical short, but it wasn't that. The actual solenoid, when I'd taken it away from the actual starter motor during the rebuild, there's a little peg on the back of the solenoid that needs to hook onto a fork, a nylon fork on the starter motor. And it wasn't. It was actually in a fully depressed position. In other words, it was almost like on an on position. I guess that was allowing a current to flow. So I took off the solenoid, identified the problem, loosened off so the 2 bolts of the solenoid are real easy. That comes right off. And then I loosened off the 2 bolts for the starter motor. You would have to have the engine out to get it completely off. But I was able to then ease the starter motor back enough to be able to hook the fork up, and then just bolt it all back in, and of course that was the problem solved. Although it cost me a couple of hours trying to work out what was going on. I had to do a lot of electrical testing and to find that it was not really an electrical problem. It ended up being a mechanical electrical problem. So that's solved, and she is turning over. My only problem left now is I don't think my fuel pump is turning on. I don't hear it when I turn on the key. I think the fuse looks good on the starter motor. If anybody's not sure about that, the starter motor fuse is down this side here on the right side, and it's that red 10 amp one there. It looks clean, although I have had problems with this fuse block here before, and it might be just bad connectors in there. Anyway, I'm going to get the fuse looks good, but I'm going to get try a new fuse and clean the contacts. But well, once I changed the fuse block for the fuel pump, And that's it there, a new one. I just hooked it in, and it's got a cap on it. The old one was really corroded. The fuse was good, but the terminals were just bad. So that one did the trick. As soon as I put that on, turned the key, you could hear the pump turning. I turned then I turned to start, and she started up immediately, which was reassuring. She was running fast, so I then had to adjust the throttle and governor so that she idles nicely. And then I found after a few minutes of running, I was getting a leak, 2 leaks actually, from the other side, from the oil filter. I was using a non-John Deere oil filter, which cross-references for this engine, but it had a different fitment and it was leaking badly, even though I'd tightened it up, I think, appropriately. And also the oil pressure sensor down there, I'd used some kind of gasket cork on it, on the threads, instead of Teflon tape, and that was leaking too. Took that out, put some Teflon tape on, put a proper oil filter on, drained some oil to do that, topped up, and everything is good. And I'll give you a quick sound. She starts up pretty good. So that's it. Seems to be running okay. We put the panels on the hood. So I'm all done now with the 445, and it's back at work. All the panels are on, the hood is on. I put on a nice new seat. Obviously, those of you that see my other videos will remember that as well as the engine seizing and stranding it, I had a tree come down, and the tree actually luckily hit the seat, which took all the force. So I put this nice new high back seat on. I think it was $123 on eBay. It's not OEM as such, but I believe it is from one of the John Deere suppliers. It's very comfortable. I did have to adapt the bracket for the whole pattern, but apart from that, it's pretty easy to install, and I'm very happy with that. The panels went on. Oh, a couple of notes about the panels, in fact, and the hood. When doing the final reassembly, when putting the panels back on the hood, I found that I was about ½ an inch out between the fixtures for the side panels, and the hood wasn't closing properly either. Well, turns out that this front section here that has 2 bolts either side going down onto the main chassis, when I was reinstalling it, there is a certain amount of movement to be had, and you can sort of lock it in. You have to choose where you're going to lock it in, I guess. And the natural inclination for me anyway was to make it as vertical as possible. Doing that, I was actually tipping it back by about ½ an inch. I loosened up those bolts, moved it forward, and then the panels fitted properly and the hood came down properly as well. The other thing that I may have mentioned previously is also that it's worth noting when reinstalling a hood that these bolts and couplers here, one either side, there's just 2 bolts holding this onto the hinge frame here. One bolt goes below the bar and one bolt is going above the bar. It's not intuitive, it's because it's not symmetric, but that's the way it fits. That's the way John Deere does it. So the engine is all nice and clean and working properly. Something else I had when the tree came down, it gave me a little crack, not a huge one, in the hood here. And I read up on, in fact I saw a video on YouTube, and someone on YouTube was recommending that you could repair vehicle plastic and motorcycle plastic panels using drywall jointing self-adhesive tape, this web type. Actually, I have it out here in the bag to show you. This self-adhesive joint tape, and then coating it with E6000 adhesive. I did that and let you give it plenty of time to dry, and my gosh, it really does work very well. It's a very inexpensive repair. turns out that obviously I had, actually my right panel's never had cracks, but I had a ton in the left panel. In fact, you can see right there where I've done it on this one, just there, but I've got more all the way down there. I did it again, same technique, using this drywall tape and E6000. Works a charm, very inexpensive. It adheres to the plastic, which is the most important thing with adhesives. Obviously, I've only got a couple of hours on it, you know, testing it, but I don't see it falling apart. I think it's going to be great. So that worked out very well. I'll close the hood down. So everything is good. I'm happy to have. Oh, and the other thing that I did I did on another video of mine, I had to repair the instrument panel because the glass was smashed when the tree came on top of it. And again, that's working fine as well. And just to show that the engine works, I'll start her up. I do have a slight exhaust noise. I noticed there was a hole in the seam on the exhaust muffler, and I'm going to get that welded. But so that makes a little more noise than it should right now, but not terribly so. There you go. New engine. All working fine. And so again, it's you know, it's taken a. So if you like my this video and find it helpful and interesting, please give it a like, and you might like some of my other videos I've been putting up regarding my 445 and 425. So please subscribe.